what to expect, but we were extremely optimistic knowing what our students' capabilities are. And I can't wait to see their finished products today. I think you will be impressed too. And again, thank you for everybody who made this week possible. You know, there's a real urgent need for representative truth tellers in media today. And we are building that pipeline into newsrooms across the country. So we appreciate you being a part of that. We hope to see all of you back in this room, or maybe actually in a physical space with us very soon. The Digitally Media Arts Camp is in partnership with Center for Prevention at Blue Cross Blue Shield, Minnesota. And without their partnership, this camp wouldn't be what it is. And they provide a lot of resources to this week, and a lot of know-how and knowledge. And they've been more than generous with our students and sharing that expertise on health equity with them. So these stories that you're about to see really knock it out of the park. So I'm going to toss it over to Sasha Houston Brown. Sasha is the Senior Communications and Advocacy Consultant at the Center for Prevention and a terrific partner we've been working with for a few years. Sasha, take it away.
Thanks, Chad. So we're really excited to see all of the finished products. Like Chad said, you know, this is our 4th year partnering with 360, and in the past we've been able to work with the TV broadcast camp. So this was a really new experience for us as well. And I think I just want to say, you know, on behalf of Christian, myself, and Blue Cross, we are so impressed, and we continue to be more impressed each year with the insights, the capability, and the capacity of all of the students. And we really do learn something from all of you guys each year. And we were particularly excited about the theme of this year's camp and looking at how racism impacts health in Minnesota. And I think that all of you exceeded our expectations and wildest dreams on this topic, and were able to really thrive in a really unpredictable and uncertain environment and just do so much justice to the subject and the stories. And we could not be more happy and impressed, and we're really excited to share these stories, not only with Blue Cross, but with other community partners and media outlets. So really excited. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sasha. And as Chad and Sasha both mentioned, this is, you know, a week that was made possible with the support of a lot of people. Students worked with professional mentors who supported them and guided them this week. The center helped coordinate our interviews with wonderful sources, but the students made these digital media art projects, and for a lot of them, this was their first time creating this kind of project. Some of the students even edited their videos or their audio stories completely on their mobile phones. So as we talk about our students being future newsroom leaders and communicators, they were really able to use a lot of free apps and resources to put together some pretty phenomenal stories. So I don't want to spend any more time talking. I'd love to turn it over to our students and to show you the work that they've done. So today you're going to be seeing several different stories. We had students pick which kind of story they wanted to tell. And like I said, for a lot of them, this was the first time telling a different kind of story. Digital media arts, this is a lot of information, but is something that St. Thomas is working on and has created a pathway for students studying emerging media to be part of. And so digital media arts is something that is an evolving field, and you will see our student stories in a minute, and you will be able to see, you know, how these stories collectively tell the story of racism as a public health issue in a really unique and interesting way. I'm going to have Allison introduce the projects, and then we will have the student talk a little bit about their work, and then we will share their story with you. So thank you again for being here, and here we go.
All right, our first student who's going to share is Ali Brodeen, and she was mentored by Jacob Maldonado Medina, and she has done an audio story with Illuminative. So Ali, take it away.
Hi, I'm Ali Brodeen. I am a rising junior at Mounds View High School, and I interviewed Leah Salgado, who is the Deputy Director of Illuminative. Illuminative is a racial and social justice organization. They use narrative change to amplify Native voices, combat negative narratives about Native people, and to build visibility for Native Americans. A large focus of the organization is eliminating mascots that depict Native Americans. From high school to pro level, there's a ridiculous amount of people who are using mascots that have names such as the Indians or Warriors, and having an image of a Native American with a headdress as their logo and printed on all these different like shirts and on their football stadiums. It's ridiculous in my mind that it's 2020 and we still have this. I also learned overall a lot about technical things. My computer crashed multiple times with all of my work on it because I kept trying to use a certain application. Since I have a Chromebook, which is very basic and has very little applications on it, I eventually did most of the recording on my phone and editing on my phone after 2 days of just losing my work continuously. It was incredibly frustrating, like yell at my computer level frustrating. I would work on something for an hour only to delete it. And overall, though, my biggest takeaway from this project is that I knew that offensive mascots had a large negative effect on the Native community, but it's even deeper than I previously thought. Native American youth are seeing their identities and culture mocked, appropriated, and diminished in their own country starting from the time that they're born. This has a large impact on how they see their culture and their lives as a whole. Their culture and them as people should be respected. And that's why I really like that I was assigned this, because it's a really important topic.
Great. Allie, we'll listen to your story now.
Sports teams all over the country have names that reference Native American people, often in very offensive ways. The words Warriors and Indians are the 6th and 8th most used nicknames for sports teams from high school to pro level, according to Mascot Database. None of these teams are quite as infamous as the Washington football team. This team has finally changed their name after years of protests. The team's name was the R word, a racial slur against Native Americans, and I've decided not to say it in this story. To get more insight on why this name change is so significant, I interviewed Leah Salgado, a member of the Paspoyaki tribe and deputy director of Illuminative.
Illuminative is we're a racial and social justice organization, and we use narrative change to amplify Native voices, combat negative narratives about Native people, and to build power and visibility for Native Americans.
Some of the most visible so-called representation of Native Americans comes in the form of offensive mascots. Mascots are not only damaging towards Native Americans, but negatively impact how non-natives see them.
Native mascots are also, I think, dehumanizing, right? When you see a group of people as just a character or a logo, right? You tend to just see them as a character or a logo, not as like fully actualized human beings.
These mascots cause real-world harm to the Native community.
Native mascots impact Native youth most harshly, or Native youth that, view these mascots tend to also limit what they believe is possible for the future. These issues around identity, right, often lead to higher rates of depression, suicidal ideation, and addiction.
According to the CDC, Native youth ages 15 to 19 have more than double the suicide rate than that of non-Hispanic white youth. Also, according to the CDC, Native American people in America report experiencing serious psychological distress, 2.5 times more than the general population over a month's time. Due to this, a mascot like the Washington football teams has serious mental health ramifications for Native people. The change in the Washington team name was a step in the right direction, but there's still so much more progress to be made.
I think it's positive for everyone to show that, you can be anything that you want. You can be who you are, right? That you don't have to fit into a stereotypical role. I think that a lot of people are going to find a lot of joy in that, right? Rather than being relegated to the, specific character types that they've always been.
For 360 Journalism and Blue Cross, I'm Allison Brodeen.
Thanks so much for sharing your story with us, Allie. Our next student is going to be Kennedy Rance. Kennedy was mentored by Brianna Grunewald, and she has created a poster and a brochure for Dream of Wild Health.
Hi, my name is Kennedy Rance. I work with Dream of Wild Health, which is a nonprofit intertribal organization that promotes youth getting back to their roots. They have a farm in Hugo, Minnesota, which actually I got to visit, and it's beautiful. They have squash and sunflowers, corn, dinosaur kale, there's all types of beautiful vegetables, and they really promote youth learning about their indigenous culture and taking pride in it. They've taught them how to cook. They've taught them the medicinal use of it. And it's really important because youth should know where they come from and take pride in with all that's going on right now. But in general, Native Americans have been almost diminished and they're dying off. And so I think it's wonderful that these youth are have mentors and elders that are taking the time really teaching them about themselves. And so much has come out of it. So now I'll present this to you. So this is a poster that I created, and I wanted to get it translated in a couple of different languages, Ojibwe and Dakota, so they can read it, but also Spanish and Somali, I think, and Hmong, even if they're not a part of the tribal, a part of the culture. I think it's important that this is in all languages because this is a great organization. And I also created a brochure that talks more about what health.
I'm pulling that up for you here, Kennedy.
So for the brochure, I envisioned that they could pass this out during meetings or when they sell food at a farmer's market, which they do on Thursdays. This is the first page, just kind of drawing people's attention with all the playful colors and youth. On the second page, I wanted to talk about the process from harvesting the indigenous seeds to then getting it to their community. And so it was a 6-step process: harvesting, preparing it, putting it in food share boxes, transporting it from Hugo, Minnesota, all the way down to the Twin Cities. They have a distribution site in St. Paul and another one in Minneapolis. People then come and pick up the food shares, and they deliver about 30 to 35 each week. People go home and cook it and enjoy it and sit around with their family and share stories and take pride in their culture, and then they recycle peats once a week. Then on the third page, I want to talk about health as a racism crisis, or health crisis, and just talking about the inequalities and letting people know, because some people might not know as an Indigenous or Native American Indian that these are believed health causes, or what's really affecting their own community. And so I came up with a graph as well. White people on average, a ratio of 1 when it comes to mortality rate, and then I have Native American, African American, Hispanic, and Asian people showing the different minorities that have a much higher mortality rate than white people. And then at the bottom, I talk about food access and food sovereignty. Drew About Health is really kind of emphasized how they want to have more food access to their to the Native community, because it's a huge problem, and a lot of Native Americans in the Twin Cities are living in food deserts. And so I wanted to highlight that by actually putting the definition, because some people might not know what that is. And then at the bottom, talking about why they do what they do. And despite these, the Native American community living in food deserts and not having all their, not having all that they need, Dream of Wild Health is striving to decrease those rates of health issues while also teaching and educating youth on the importance of their culture and why they should practice. At the end, I'm so close to being finished, but Dream of Wild Health tripled their acreage due to COVID-19, and they decided they want to lease that land and teach Indigenous and Native American farmers how to grow food and also produce more food so that they can give it to Native and Indigenous chefs. They also produced last year alone 8 tons of produce, which they either donated or sold during food shares or at the farmers market. And they also have one of the largest seed collections in the region. And that's very important because during the Trail of Tears, Native women unable to carry anything with them sewed their seeds into their clothing so that they could preserve their heritage. And they really have, because 200 years later, Dream of Wild Health is still collecting these seeds and growing them. And that's very important because they're untouched, they're indigenous, they're not crossbreeded or mixed with GMO or anything of that sort. And so that's really important. And I want that to be highlighted. So then after you read all this, you're like, okay, well, how do I get involved? And so there's a bunch of ways you can volunteer at their farm, send your children some of their youth programs, which are amazing. I know I'll be volunteering next week. You can become an employer and, you know, be at the front lines of change that you seek in your community. Donate money, time, or just resources, and then subscribe. They have a weekly newsletter that they send out just talking about what they do and how you can take part in it. And then the contact information is at the bottom. You have not only their office, but the address to their office, but the address to their farm so that you can go out and see it for yourself. And then on the last page, it just talks about made in collaboration with St. Thomas and 360, of course, and also Blue Cross. And then at the end, there'll be some more photos. This one over here, when you first enter through World Health Farm, they have this pole. They don't have a sign, but they have this flag that has the 4 Native American colors. You know, red standing for the blood of the people and women, and black standing for the richness of the soil, white standing for sovereignty, and then yellow standing for the sun and brightness and that pride and culture. And so they really represent that as their flag. And then the one to the right is a picture of their farm and the produce that they grow, squash and kale and all types of stuff. And then at the bottom, I think I have learn more and visit them at their website. So that's what I've produced.
Thank you so much, Kennedy. That is really impressive. Our next student to share is going to be Didipia, and she created a infographic story with Project Food Forest, and she was mentored by Miguel Odegaard. So Didipia, take it.
Hi, I'm Jadipia. My project was about Project Food Forest, which is a nonprofit in Rock County, Minnesota, that is essentially a community garden. So they plant perennials and a lot of different native plants that grow back every year. So they can be a sustainable food source for the people in the community. It's really an open space where anyone can help, like, come grow, and anyone can take as much as food they need. And more importantly, it's a place for the whole community to come together, you know, regardless of like what their backgrounds are. And the work that they do is really important because Rock County is a food desert, meaning they only have access to about 1 grocery store, 1 farmer's market, and 1 food shelf. So for people that don't have access to either of these places, they're really burdened with food insecurity. So I guess I can walk you through my article here. So I spoke with Kimberly Rockman, who is the president and director of Project Food Forest. So currently it has 2 locations in Sioux Falls and Rock County. And what was really interesting for me to learn about my story was the setting of an organization like this in a more rural setting. I'd never heard of Rock County before, but it was interesting to see the steps that even smaller, like maybe more majority white communities with only a handful of families of color are taking to improve equity within the scope of their region. So that infographic is about Rock County and their demographics. So you can see that, you know, there really aren't a lot of families from different backgrounds. And then, so yeah, it's a food desert. So a food desert is essentially a community that lacks easy access to fresh, healthy, and affordable food. And it's actually very common in our country around us, even though a lot of us may not realize it, but living in an area like that can lead to a lot of different health problems. So yeah, Rock County is a food desert, which means, you know, it makes the work that Project Food Forest is doing even more urgent and even more important. And the work that they do also does, you know, tackle this idea of racism as a public health issue, because the issues that they tackle, so a lot of families may not have access to land in order to plant sustainable food for themselves. So land equity is one issue that they help make accessible to everyone. It's also a place where people from all backgrounds can come together to share stories and to learn about different things that they can do with the plants that they grow. And they also have several partnerships. So 2 of the main ones are A Healthier Southwest and Love One Level. And the work that they do, they hold public forums, they regularly meet with the community and discuss ways that they can help. So when I spoke with Mrs. Rockman, she said that if they don't know the ways that they can, if they're not asking people how they can help, they don't really know what the needs are. So that's a really important way for them to connect with their community. And especially with the pandemic, the recent pandemic, the work that they do has become more urgent because COVID-19 has disproportionately affected communities of color in Minnesota. So when they're working with this idea of how racism presents itself as a public health issue, especially during times of a pandemic, it's really important that this issue is like approached the right way. And so yeah, that's the end.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Didipia. That was awesome. Our next student to present is going to be Evan Odegaard. Evan was mentored by Greg Vandegrift, and Evan produced a video project, and the organization that he worked with was the Seed Project. So Evan, will get your video queued up here.
Okay, so hi, I'm Evan Odegaard. I'm a rising junior at Nova Classical Academy. This week I did a digital video story on the Seed Project, which stands for the Southeast Asian Diaspora Project. I talked to Janita Pengdara Potter, who is the executive director there and also the founder. Seed is a really amazing organization which helps engage and empower Southeast Asian diaspora communities. Recently, they've done a lot of work helping these communities through what Ms. Pengdara Potter called dual pandemics, these being COVID-19 and racism. That really gets to the heart of what we're talking about here with racism as a public health issue, I think, too. So that's a little bit about Seed. Now, this project was a digital video. This was actually my first time ever making a video like this. I actually did it mostly on my phone with iMovie. So that was my first time using that kind of software. And I learned a lot about how to make a video, how writing a script for a video has to be different from like writing a news story on paper, all the different opportunities and challenges that come with that. So that was a really good learning opportunity for me. And I really hope you like my story.
When COVID-19 hit, the Minneapolis-based Seed Project provided hand sanitizer and face masks to Minnesota's Southeast Asian communities.
There's a lot of talented people who have so many amazing skill set, and so we've been kind of tapping into that.
SEED, which stands for the Southeast Asian Diaspora Project, does more than COVID-19 relief. It's been engaging and empowering Southeast Asian diaspora communities since its start in 2011.
One of the key things that make us see it is that we are able to center in our Southeast Asian narratives and voices and experiences, and we know and understand the cultural nuance as well to know exactly how we need to communicate.
During the pandemic, SEED has created multiple health messages in several Southeast Asian languages.
Because with messaging, you can't just do a translation. You have to do a cultural translation. So there's the literal and there's a cultural translation that has to happen.
By summer, SEED found itself active in the fight against dual pandemics, COVID-19 and systemic racism.
And then when George Floyd happened, then we found ourselves in a dual pandemic, having to really think about how do we really engage our communities with everything that they're dealing with.
SEED offers Southeast Asian diaspora communities healing and hope, even in these hard times.
That's pretty much what we've been grappling with, is addressing the dual pandemics and finding ourselves in a position where we're becoming the middle communicator.
For 360 Journalism and Blue Cross, I'm Evan Odegaard.
That was great, Evan. Thank you so much for sharing your project with us. Our next student to share is going to be Fran. Fran created a social media story for the Main Street Project, and they were mentored by Susan Du. So Fran, take it away.
Hi, I'm Fran. I interviewed an organization in Northfield, Minnesota called Main Street Project. They're dedicated to helping replenish the land, as well as helping community members get connected and help each other out. I interviewed Rocky Casillas, who is the communications director at Main Street Project, and I just wanted to get to know his insight on more of how their goals are and what they do there. And I also ended up interviewing Sue Latorno, who is a project manager at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and getting her perspective on how they benefit helping organizations like Main Street.
Much, Fran, for sharing that. Our next student to share is going to be Nalani Vang. She was mentored by Laura McCallum, and she has produced a audio story for CAL, which is the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. So, Nalani.
Hi, my name is Nalani Vang, and I'm an upcoming sophomore at the Math and Science Academy. As Allison said, I did an audio story with the Coalition of Asian American Leaders, and I talked with Nick Kaur, who is an organizer and movement builder there. So the organization is an advocate to make sure that Asian American voices are being heard and supported. So this ties back to health equity and specifically racism, because Asians are being targeted as the source of COVID-19. And however, this information is very misleading because not all Asians are being targeted for this too. But for years, Asian Americans have been invisible to the world, and because of their belief or culture, they prevent Asian Americans from speaking their voices. So majority of the Asian Americans are in desperate needs of access to doctors, housing, jobs, clean water, and education. So the most challenging part of my audio story was writing an audio story because I've never done one before, and also editing on a computer is really difficult. I thought it would be a little bit easier, but I learned a lot from it, and it was such a great experience. So I hope you can take away from this that Asian American stories are being untold, and how we as a society can help lift the narratives of Asian American. Thank you. The Coalition of Asian American Leaders, or CAL, is working to amplify the voices of the Asian American community. Nick Kaur is an organizer and movement builder for CAL. He says the coronavirus pandemic has created new challenges for the Asian American community.
Recognizing that many folks are facing bias or discrimination or harassment because of the way that they look, because they're Asian.
When President Trump referred to the coronavirus as the Chinese flu, Kaur says that term led to a rise in racism towards Asians. He also says there's a myth that all Asians are more educated and successful than any other minority group.
The way in which America views race is black and white. And so Asian Americans are in a place that is closer towards whiteness because we have been placed there by structural racism, by white supremacy. People will use the term model minority to talk about Asians. You know, we call it the model minority myth.
Kaur explains that some Asian Americans are doing really well, but many are not, such as refugee communities and people from Southeast Asia. According to the State of the Asian Pacific Minnesotans, from 2000 to 2010, 1 in 6 Asian Minnesotans lived below the poverty line. That is 34,759 individuals living under $11,139 per year. Asian Americans or Asians trying to immigrate to the United States encounter a lot of difficult situations as they hope to live the American dream. Kaur says Cal wants to make sure that leaders hear and support the voices of the Asian American community.
It's really important for folks who represent us to know and hear the stories that exist within the larger narrative of who we are as Minnesotans. And if we don't do that, then our stories are being left out.
Kaur emphasizes it is extremely important that Asian American voices are being heard now and not continually being ignored during the inflation of racism against Asians. For 360 Journalism and Blue Cross, I'm Nalani Vang.
Thank you so much, Nalani, for all your work on that story. Our next student to share is going to be Jacqueline Martinez. Jacqueline was mentored by Joe Herrera, and she also worked with Cal. And Jacqueline has produced for us an infographic.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Martinez, and I'll be a rising senior at Harding High School. So I also worked with Cal. I think my digital story is also really reminiscent to what Nalani has done, but really just connects together with it. I explain more in the infographics. It's not showing up. Yeah. Okay, here. Okay. So in my infographic, I wanted to really teach people a little more about the resources that Cal has, especially talking about the immigration waves in Minnesota history. So here's a little timeline thing. It's not really exactly in order because people immigrate here for many different reasons, but this is a really good explanation onto what kind of what other like ethnic groups is included when we say Asian American. Here are a few Asian American demographics. So on the bottom right, there is a chart or a line talking about the ratio of Asian Americans to other racial and ethnic groups. And in the pie chart, you can see the different separation of the ethnic groups in Asian American. Here I explain a lot more about Cal as a group and their leadership. I talked also to Nick Core, and he's the former civic engagement director at the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, as well as being the organizer and movement builder at Cal. So I got a lot of information about what it means to really be Asian American in America, but as well as the disparities that they face. Here's more talk about the groups that they have in Cal. Especially they have 2 leadership programs, their main ones that are becoming organizers, becoming advocates, which is for youth, students and adults in the MOVE group, making our voices effective for equality, for equity. Okay, in recent months, Asian Americans have experienced discrimination. In the rest of the infographic, I would like to talk about the different resources that have been put online for people to watch, as well as to know that the government is doing a lot. Here we have more, I guess, graphs, so you can see on the smallest one is a ratio of positive cases to assumed negative cases within the Minnesota Asian population. So you can see here, I don't think it's that viewable, but it's like 1.2% of Asian Americans in Minnesota are actually infected. So the belief that all Asian Americans carry the virus is really dehumanizing and false. Here on this slide, there's a few hyperlinks you can click on each of the photos, but these are examples of anti-Asian bias in Minnesota. So Governor Walz and Governor Peggy Flanagan created a discrimination hotline to protect Minnesotan civil rights. They signed an executive order to reinstate that. So we created this hotline. You can report discrimination and racism Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. So this infographic is showing the process, at least for investigation, when you do report discrimination or when you do report something. There's a few hyperlinks as well to the Minnesota Department of Human Rights and another on what you should consider before calling or what is actually protected within the Human Rights Act. Here are their multilingual flyers that they created for people around Minnesota. So this is just showing people what the, what do you call it? Sorry, hotline. So here are multiple webinars as well as an article to show how Cal has spoken out to different groups around Minnesota since the pandemic and on topics of xenophobia and the diversity in Minnesota of the Asian population. They have talks with the Human Rights Department as well as a few other organizations within Minnesota. So it's really important to know. Okay, here is just a few links to Blue Cross as well as St. Thomas and the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. Is really useful to have that kind of direct link to those organizations so you can learn more.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. That was very impressive. Our next student to share is going to be Emile Liden. And Emile was mentored by Demain Chun, and they were able to do an interview with Brian Yazzie, and Emile produced a photo essay for us. So Emile, I'm going to let you explain more about that.
All right, thank you, Allison. Hi, my name is Emile Liden. I'm a upcoming senior at Minnetonka High School. And on Tuesday, I had the opportunity to go to the Minneapolis American Indian Center to interview and photograph Chef Brian Yazzie, who is a chef at the Gatherings Cafe and runs the Elder Meal Program. So throughout the Twin Cities, elders in the Native American community rely on free meals from the Elder Meal Program. And since the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March, the Elder Meal Program has turned to delivery service, delivering meals to elderly all the way from the north side of Minneapolis to neighborhoods in St. Paul. And this program is really important for a few reasons. First, the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected Native American communities across the United States. We saw a month or so ago, or more like 2 or 3 months ago, when Doctors Without Borders was called for the first time to serve in the United States in the southwestern states, serving Native American communities there. And second, the elderly population across the U.S. are most vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus. And so doing things such as going outside to get food, going to the grocery stores, become really dangerous for the elderly across the United States. And third, which I learned was the driving factor for continuing this program during the COVID-19 pandemic, is this belief of the importance of serving the elderly that is held among Native Americans, and community-oriented service instead of individual-oriented service, which I think are two things that we can definitely learn from the Native American community, which I thought were just really beautiful to learn about. And so, as Allison mentioned, these are my photos. I was able to capture Brian as well as another chef, Vanessa, as they were preparing some food at the American Indian Center in Minneapolis. And that is Chef Brian Yazzie. And one of the things that you will notice through a lot of these photos are the ingredients that they use. A lot of them are native to the Americas and have deep ties to Native American culture, which also is important for the Elder Meal Program, because as Chef Vanessa had told me when I was there, it brings them memories from when they were children, eating traditional Native American dishes. And then this photo I can talk a bit. This is Ben Shendo. He actually helped start the Elder Meal Program delivery service back in March. And this quote, I love that this quote. He says that our bodies are the vehicles that they can't do no more, referring to the elderly in his community, which I thought was a very beautiful thing to hear, and which was the main driving factor in continuing the Elder Meal Program. And these are the boxes that the dishes are placed into and delivered around the Twin Cities. And then the residents of B. Digan, the elder home in Minneapolis, made a thank you sign for the chefs at the Gatherings Cafe for all the work that they have been doing. Those are my photos. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And our last project today is going to be presented by Aaliyah Demry. Aaliyah was mentored by Simeon Lancaster. She had an interview with Dr. Abdul Omari, and she created a video for us to watch. So Aaliyah, I will let you explain a little more about that.
I'm Aaliyah Demry. I'm going to be an upcoming freshman this year at Minneapolis Community and Technical College. I sat down with Dr. Abdul Omari. He's a very nice guy. He does a lot of equity work, and he's a part of many different boards in Minneapolis. I really wanted to base the whole digital video around George Floyd. I felt like it was kind of impossible not to talk to Dr. Omari and not talk about this, and I felt like a digital video would be the best way. And I got the chance to work with Simeon as my mentor, and he did like a really nice job. Like, I feel like I learned so much from him. Like, I feel like I could start editing like Beyonce videos now. Like, I just feel really happy to work with him. I think this came out pretty great. So, yeah.
1, 2, 3!
The faces and voices at the Minnesota State Capitol on June 2nd were young.
Justice for George Floyd. Justice for George Floyd. Black Lives Matter, and we want to show that.
Black lives! Instead of planning summer vacation, these Minnesota high schoolers plan to fight for justice for George Floyd. George Floyd's death and the protests hit home for Minneapolis residents, like Abdul Omari. He advises businesses on equity issues to create a better future for Minnesota's youth of color.
Because like my phone has not stopped ringing since it happened, and it's like all of a sudden people care about racism.
As protests against racism spread nationwide, looting began and violent clashes with police left hundreds of people wounded. Omari says that the danger isn't only physical, but mental, especially for youth.
I think that it'll stay with people for a very long time, and we as a community need to continue to think about how we are more accepting of some of the mental health impacts that we have.
And those impacts only weigh heavier because of COVID-19.
You know, we're in the middle of a global pandemic that physically is impacting Black and brown people at significantly higher numbers than white people.
Despite that, and the physical and mental health risks, young activists weren't stopped from making their voices heard.
But the reality is, if we're actually going to dismantle the systemic oppression and racism, everybody needs to be a part of it. I am excited and I am energized by youth involvement.
From 360 Journalism, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Center of Prevention, and the Fly Subject, I'm Aaliyah Demry in Minneapolis.
Yeah!
Well, those are all of our students' stories. How wonderful were those? Congratulations, students, on finishing those stories. Thank you so much to our mentors who helped work with you and to make this possible. Thank you to our partners at the Center for Prevention. This is our 4th year of telling these kinds of stories. This is a really exciting time for us to be telling these stories. And what we continue to tell our students and the people we've engaged with this summer is that, you know, youth voices matter more than ever right now. And as digital media changes and evolves, our students are showing us what you're able to do. Like I said, most of these students, this was their first time producing this kind of story. They were using free apps, free tools. Some of them did all this on their phone. So for all of our newsroom leaders out there, get ready, because the content you're going to be getting from these students when they're in your newsroom a few years from now is going to be absolutely phenomenal. So I want to thank you all for joining us again. Thank you to all of our students for all of your hard work and everyone who made this week possible. Chad, did you want to say any final remarks here?
Yeah, I want to just reiterate what Teresa said. Thank you to our mentors, of course, to our students, everybody who attended today. But I also want to thank Teresa and Allison DeMoret, who's our student worker and has been the MC here today. It was amazing, just a couple short months. And we're so proud of the work our students did, and I appreciate everybody's support in making it happen. Thank you.
And we plan to have these stories published on our platforms. The center will share them as well, and I'm sure some of the sources will want to share these stories because they are really well done. So thank you again, everyone, for being here today. Students, we're going to wrap a few things up, so this is time for us to say goodbye to our guests, and thank you for joining us today. You're free to leave the meeting.
Amazing work, everybody.
Thank you.